Be prepared for simplistic guidance like take a nap. Trust me, there ain't no nap long enough to take to push back on this ancient fatigue of narcissistic abuse. Today we're going to take on the issue of physical symptoms in people who are experiencing narcissistic abuse. Believe it or not, it really does seem that narcissistic abuse can actually literally make you sick. Before we go on to that, one thing I'd love to hear from you guys in the comment section, if you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, do you feel like you got sick, like literally physically ill? What kinds of things did you experience with it? Headaches, muscle aches, like what happened? Think if we can sort of see what that is. Many other people say, yeah, I got migraine headaches, or I got all this muscle weakness, or whatever it may be. I think everyone sort of needs to hear this so you can really see what the reach of this is. And before we even go farther, I'm always going to invite you, please, you're going to see what an amazing community this is. Just look at the comment section, subscribe, join this channel, hit that notification bell to be reminded to get your little dose of narcissism training. And if you do end up liking this, give us that thumbs up, because I like a little validation too. So let's talk a little bit about the physical symptoms we can see in people who are experiencing narcissistic abuse. So let's start with a question. Can narcissistic abuse literally make you physically ill? I'd base it on what I've seen. I'd say, yeah, it does. So let's just take this on solely from a stress perspective. Being in a narcissistic relationship is stressful, and stress has numerous impacts on health. Headaches, muscle tension, diminished immune function, which can in turn make you more vulnerable to all kinds of illnesses. If you have pre-existing health conditions such as autoimmune disorders, asthma, diabetes, stress can exacerbate the course of your illness. And if you have a more acute illness, such as cancer, experiencing narcissistic abuse, as with any acute illness, may potentially result in a poorer course just because of the ongoing stress, which makes engaging in treatment, adherence, and coping all the more difficult. There are a couple of different pathways by which narcissistic abuse can actually affect your physical health. First, there's a sort of direct pathway as a source of stress, narcissistic abuse being a source of stress, and the release of stress hormones such as glucocorticoids, and then the glucocorticoid regulation. And these things impact immune functioning, as well as things like, for example, inflammatory responses that would exacerbate asthma, autoimmune diseases, and type 2 diabetes. And this glucocorticoid dysregulation is also associated with the onset of mental illnesses. Now, narcissistic abuse is a unique form of stress. It can be long-term. In some cases, it is inescapable. Many people still do not fully understand it. So there's a risk your experience with this stressor can be minimized by other people. And as you actually start feeling physically ill, you may not actually connect the toxic person in your life with the slow deterioration of your health. Doing the kind of research we need to do to substantiate this is not going to be easy. In an ideal world, we would follow people for many years, monitor their health, measure their relationships and their relationship quality and stress levels, and watch what happens. I hope someone does that relationship by the time, I hope someone does that research. By the time it comes out, I'm going to be long dead, okay? My observational perch on this, though, has been solely observational. I have watched otherwise healthy people develop illnesses that didn't make sense, given their age and their physical condition, or have had illnesses that had much more complex courses. And the one thing that they had in common was long-term relationships with people who had very difficult personalities. The physical effects we observe in people experiencing narcissistic abuse can also happen through indirect pathways. Specifically, people experiencing narcissistic abuse stop taking good care of themselves. They don't adhere to their medication. They don't get good sleep. They don't get good nutrition. They don't engage in any healthy exercise. Those of you experiencing narcissistic abuse, and this was actually another episode in the series, you have terrible self-care. And since the narcissists in your life don't care whether or not you take care of yourself or not, but let me tell you this, those narcissists sure as hell ensure that they take very good care of themselves, and they expect everyone to get on board with that. You don't have someone reminding you to take care of you, stepping in, or actually caring for you. Over the long term, the person experiencing narcissistic abuse simply stops trying, can get bogged down in the apathy, and the futility of these relationships can translate into you not adequately taking care of yourself and taking the stance of, ugh, why bother? This is real, and I am a firm believer that these narcissistic relationships take years off of our lives. The constant sympathetic nervous system activation that a person experiences when they're in a narcissistic relationship, and by sympathetic nervous system I mean that fight, flight, or freeze response, means that our bodies are running at a state of physiological strain that puts a lot of wear and tear on us for the long term. It's like driving a car into the ground and never getting the oil changed or the car maintained. And for many people, narcissistic relationships are a lifelong struggle. It may be a parent that they've been grappling with all their lives, well into adulthood, or having had to deal with it in childhood. And now, in adulthood, you're dealing with a difficult or narcissistic partner or spouse. It can feel unrelenting, and I can promise you this, it is taking a toll on your body. Many people in narcissistic relationships report experiencing a sort of brain fog. It's sort of this sense of not being able to think straight or think well or think sharply. It's interesting because it's very similar to what people who have other forms of brain fog. Where I've most commonly heard this is those who are completing or have completed, for example, a course of chemotherapy, people taking other kinds of medications, people living with fatigue-inducing disorders. And those are other places that brain fog happens. Brain fog is also a commonplace issue in people living with narcissistic abuse, and it can exacerbate an already growing sense of self-doubt and confusion. If you grew up with a narcissistic parent or parents, you may have struggled with the physical symptoms of narcissistic abuse through stomach aches, headaches, even skin rashes, which are all ways that stress can physiologically manifest in a child. As a child, you may have also been more prone to colds and other viral illnesses. Listen, a child can't even put a name to this, but the child obviously is going to get exhausted from walking on eggshells and living with an unappeasable parent. Researchers such as Janice Kiecolt-Glaser have documented the deleterious health effects of marital conflict on immune function. Her research is actually quite fascinating. I always think that we could potentially extrapolate her research to narcissistic relationships. Narcissists certainly do not fight fair, and years of the toxic, difficult conflict and abuse is likely to be wearing down your immune system. So the short answer really is that your narcissistic relationship may be hazardous for your health. So what do you do? First of all, if you haven't done this for a long time, please get a physical, and ideally get regular physicals, especially if you're in a narcissistically abusive situation. At a minimum, you'll be able to monitor the onset of any preventable or early detectable health conditions, and at a minimum, stay on top of your health. Number two, please at least do the preventative healthcare stuff that you can. Try and eat better. Sleep a little bit more, sleep under better conditions if you can. Take your medications regularly. Get some activity into your life. Do not wait for the narcissist to step up and offer to have your back when it comes to your health. In general, they don't really care. Narcissistic people don't like sick people, and you will exhaust yourself if you try to induce them into caring about you and your health. Number three, please be aware of your own family health history so you know your own health vulnerabilities. Again, this ties into that first recommendation I made to get regular screenings for your health. But this becomes doubly important if there are family health issues that can place you at greater risk for the dangerous effects of stress-induced illnesses. Number four, look alive with infectious diseases, especially during flu season. And I'm saying this during a pandemic, okay? This also matters for that too. If you're enduring narcissistic abuse, odds are your immune system isn't the best. And since the narcissist is not going to take care of you if you get sick, it's better you don't get sick in the first place. Number five, please have a real plan in place if you get sick. If you think your narcissist is going to be the one who's always ready to drive you to chemotherapy or doctor's appointments, think again. Because even if they do step up to the plate, they're going to complain about it a lot. Make a plan with friends or other family members. Don't make the mistake that so many others who have experienced narcissistic abuse have made. Don't think that once you get sick, that the narcissist will finally step up and take care of you. It's not going to happen. And you do not want to be scrambling after all of this, after you get sick, while enduring the grief that in fact, the narcissist does not have your back, even when you're sick, because the fantasy is that's when they'd step up. Number six, therapy. Therapy is important. It's an important stress-busting tool and a great place to learn tools to cope, not only hopefully with this relationship, but also with stress, and just have a place to let it all out. So when I say that narcissistic abuse makes you sick, I really mean it. If you can't get out of this relationship, and I know a lot of you can't get out of your narcissistic relationships, set the boundaries you need to stay healthy. Even if your narcissist doesn't care, there are people in your life who do. For once, please choose yourself. Your health may depend on it. And I want to leave you with one last tip, because I asked you about, I told you need to know your family history. What gets really tricky is if part of your family is narcissistic, they may not be as forthcoming with their family history. While everybody's still young enough and alive, please get that information, because you may need to ask a benevolent aunt who lives on the other side of the country or the world. Quickly get all that health information, because if you do have limited communication with a narcissistic family member, you may not be able to get that comprehensive health history, and you would be surprised how useful some of these sorts of health historical issues can be for your healthcare provider, especially given the stress you're under because of narcissistic abuse, to understand your health and the vulnerabilities you may have to stress. So please, always stay on top of your health, because let me tell you, this relationship ain't good for it. How many of you who have gone through narcissistic abuse or know someone who's gone through narcissistic abuse have struggled with chronic pain? That pain that doesn't go away and that really wrecks your life. So let's see where people are at with that, because that's what we're going to take on today. This idea of people who are going through narcissistic abuse and for some reason quite often are also struggling with chronic pain. For those of you who are interested in healing, please go to the video notes. You can hit that link and learn more about a more deep dive healing program we're having. And certainly people living with chronic pain knows how much this can affect their lives. And if you're new to this channel also, please subscribe and join this community. So let's talk about chronic pain and narcissistic abuse. One issue I have talked about on this YouTube channel is the impact of narcissistic abuse on our health, our physical health. It's clear that it does a number on our mental health, but our physical health, just literally how our bodies feel. And the linkages are pretty clear. If for no other reason than that narcissistic abuse is a massive stressor and often a lifelong stressor, and the immune impacts, the central nervous system impacts, and in turn, the impacts on all bodily systems are quite compelling. I have worked with and talked with myriad survivors who have shared stories of illnesses they had very few sort of biological or genetic or behavioral risks for, or who had the onset or exacerbation of things like autoimmune conditions that are impacted by stress. And something else I am seeing more and more in survivors is chronic pain. Chronic pain is the pain that persists after the physiological causes of the pain have largely healed or are ruled out. So for example, when a person, first breaks a bone, or in the weeks after a surgery, we see acute pain. There's surgery or there's an injury, and the pain is a clear byproduct of that. Medications and therapies and icing and things like that are used to manage it. But over time, things may transition to a point where there's really no longer a clear identifiable physiological cause that makes sense, and then pain is treated and conceptualized as chronic pain. Chronic pain isn't fake, it's very, very real, and it's hard to treat because the cause isn't always as clear. There's no surgery that can be done. There's no way to even follow or track the biological progress except to ask the person their pain level. And as you can imagine, when a person experiences chronic pain, some of the risks include things like potentially getting dependent on narcotic medications and limitations, other areas of life, not being able to work or things like that, or mental health issues, lots of depression in people with chronic pain. So you're not going to be surprised when I tell you that people who experience long-term narcissistic abuse are often at risk for chronic pain. And there are a few reasons for this. First, many people who experience narcissistic abuse do not address their own physical health, sometimes for many years. They often do not get preventative health care, for example, even physicals and things like that, as often as they should. And they don't care for themselves, and the narcissistic people in their lives are not going to care for them. So when they're ill, or just they need to, they might even do things like delay medical care. So medical issues can get missed, and the ongoing stress of the narcissistic abuse can impact a person physiologically in a manner that presents as pain. In addition, if a person experiencing long-term narcissistic abuse is experiencing a medical issue, or perhaps recovering from something like a surgery or an illness, once again, it's not likely that the narcissistic people in their lives are going to pitch in to take care of them. So as a result, we may see longer lasting pain post-surgically or post-illness, and then a greater likelihood of chronic pain. Pain is a really funny beast. Psychological pain and physical pain are experienced somewhat similarly in the brain. Dr. Naomi Eisenberger's groundbreaking research shows that both social pain and physical pain sort of share these sort of neural origins in our brain, meaning that our brain experiences both. Social and physical pain is just pain. Broken heart, broken arm, the brain just knows it as pain. And again, similar areas of the brain subserve that pain, whether it's social or physical. Narcissistic abuse is a daily, sometimes decades-long broken heart. And what this means is that people who experience narcissistic abuse may be more vulnerable to experiencing long-term physical pain and have poorer outcomes when they experience any kind of an illness or injury or surgery. Now, this is really real. If you are experiencing narcissistic abuse, this isn't just about the psychological harm of these relationships, because they are, but we feel these in our bodies. I am sure many of you have had this experience, that this relationship literally makes you sick. The difficult part, and I have witnessed it firsthand with long-term survivors of narcissistic abuse, is that the medical establishment doesn't really get it. So if you try to frame sort of experience of chronic pain to healthcare professionals, and I've done this on behalf of patients, that you try to share that this person's in a long-term toxic relationship that may be exacerbating or even creating their pain experience, you're probably going to get blank stares. Maybe there's some truth to that, because the healthcare professionals aren't going to tell you to get a divorce or stop talking to your mother as a way of benefiting or treating your pain. But I do wonder if cutting toxic people out of your life may be more powerful than any narcotic out there for your pain, especially chronic pain. When we are around toxic people, we tend to tense up. We hold our breath. We move more cautiously. We walk on eggshells. And we also have floods of stress hormones when we are shouted at or gaslighted. And all of this worsens the pain response. Even for people who are long-term survivors of narcissistic abuse, they will report that simply observing hostile behavior in other people, in the news, in a movie, out in public, they will physiologically feel it, and often as pain. I actually do think that from a physical standpoint, chronic pain is a major hazard of narcissistic relationships. And when people are getting worked up by healthcare providers for pain, trying to determine the cause of the pain, little attention is paid to the contribution of these relationships, of toxic relationships, to the ongoing maintenance of the pain. But we cannot underestimate the impact of these relationships to the very real physiological experiences we have. And if you are experiencing chronic pain and are experiencing narcissistic abuse, just to understand that there's likely a connection between the two so you can be kinder to yourself. Many times, people with chronic pain are pathologized. They're told that it's all in their head, that they're being dramatic, that there might even just be something wrong with their head that's beyond the pain. And this is a really bad mix for a survivor of narcissistic abuse who already tends towards self-doubt and self-blame. So combined with the self-blame of the chronic pain, well, they can't find a cause for this pain, so this must be something I'm making up. It can be a really bad place physically and mentally for a person who's going through narcissistic abuse, who not only doubt themselves, now they actually literally doubt their pain. So the next time you think that your narcissistic relationship is a pain in the neck, you may not be that far from the truth. And this is a pain you cannot just medicate away. In these situations of chronic pain, a combination of working with good multidisciplinary pain teams, having therapy, and recognizing that the presence of this relationship is making any health issue you're having worse can be a real wake-up call. So let's talk about fatigue. It's exhausting. It's exhausting to talk and not be heard, to share something about your life or a feeling and be gaslighted, to live your life and be invalidated, to tell the truth and then be faced with a lie, to try to win a person over just to feel like you're not enough, and recognizing that nothing you do will change this. It's exhausting. You know, it's one thing to work hard to climb up a mountain and get to the summit. You're exhilarated. The hard work paid off. You get to see the big view. Now imagine walking and walking and walking up a hill, but you never get to the top. That's exhausting. Fatigue is a physically really debilitating aspect of narcissistic abuse. As you can imagine, it's a byproduct of other patterns observed in narcissistic abuse, of the sleep difficulties, of that thing I called anergia. And it's more than just physical fatigue. It's a psychological fatigue. There's no other way to put it. These relationships are exhausting. They feel pointless. They are the summitless mountain. the journey that has no point. Futility and fatigue are closely related. Fatigue saps you of a sense of hope and future. And many of the symptoms discussed in the A-Town video are a byproduct or predicted by fatigue. The apathy, the anhedonia, and the anergia. It's awful to feel fatigued. Listen, you may even be getting enough sleep, but still be fatigued, secondary to narcissistic abuse, because of the confusing abyss that lies in front of you day after day. I'm a big believer that knowledge can help a little with this. If you know what you are dealing with, you may not be as wiped out by the sense of surprise or disappointment, which so often accompanies narcissistic abuse. Many people blame themselves, and in fact, the narcissist may become quite frustrated with you for being fatigued. They might tell you that you're boring, or even worse than that, for just being tired and not at all showing any concern for your fatigue. And okay, that doesn't really make sense, but okay. But once you are clear on what this fatigue is, some of that good old radical acceptance helps. Because then you might feel a slightly greater sense of mastery if you radically accept. Because honestly, the sadness and grief that this is your life, that these are your circumstances, can leave you with that heavy fatigue that accompanies the recognition that, yes, this is my life, but also the recognition of the idea that without making a major change, whether you leave the relationship or go no contact, that you may or may not be willing to make, then there isn't much that you can do about what you're in, so you feel fatigued. Fatigue can make you feel older and wearier than your years. Interestingly, I am currently actually experiencing a little bit of a bout of narcissistic abuse in my life. Yeah, me. None of us are immune, gang. So like I'm going through these waters now. And what's striking me is I'm so struck by the fatigue and what a central pattern it is to narcissistic abuse. But it's an existential tiredness. It's a heaviness. It would take 1,000-year nap to move this. This isn't just about getting a good night's sleep. And sadly, when somebody sees you're fatigued, you know what they tell you? You just need to take a nap. That's the guidance you get from people who don't understand narcissistic abuse. So, what do? First of all, be kind to yourself. Turn inward if you need. Cut out a lot of the BS that you don't need to have to deal with on that day. Turn the tap off on the toxic people and maybe the toxic responsibilities in your life. Give yourself the space you need and just practice a little bit of self-kindness. You might have a little bit more bandwidth the next day. Number 2, always rule out other causes for fatigue. While it's very likely that the narcissistic abuse is a major driver of your fatigue, in case that this might be due to a medical condition, you want to get that ruled out. Thirdly, you must expect no sympathy from your narcissist. Don't tell them that you're tired just to be gaslighted by them. My favorite is when you tell someone, oh, I'm tired, and your narcissist says, you aren't tired, you have no right to be tired. Don't tell them you're fatigued. And even if you do tell other people, be prepared for simplistic guidance like take a nap. Trust me, there ain't no nap long enough to take to push back on this ancient fatigue of narcissistic abuse. Number 4, lots of us are feeling fatigued now. The world has gone upside down and our lives don't make sense in the same way. For those who are enduring narcissistic abuse at the same time as all the things that are going on in the world, fatigue is almost a guarantee. Try not to hold unrealistic standards and keep a more realistic pace. And you know what? Please stop watching the Instagram posts of people making four-course quarantine dinners and baking home-baked bread. Listen, make yourself a sandwich and call it a day when you need. Fatigue sucks. It shows on your face and in your work and all that you do. It doesn't feel good. It can leave you feeling like you're always kind of sick and not keeping up. I have been struck, though, by how often fatigue improves almost right away when people step away from the narcissist in their lives. And when that isn't possible, it often isn't, please try other things like boundaries, disengagement, and realistic expectations. It may not fully disarm the narcissist in your life, but at least it may give you a greater sense of control. And then maybe you can try to get a good night's sleep, but like I said, it's going to take a lot more than one good night of sleep to push back on this fatigue. So thanks again for tuning in. Please subscribe. Love to hear your fatigue stories too and how you guys push back on this, because let me tell you, this fatigue is something you carry around with you a lot. People will look at you and say, gosh, you look real tired. You're thinking, oh man, I slept for 9 hours last night, but it's something different. It's a different kind of a tired, and it's very unique to narcissistic abuse.